Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the cartoonist behind the currently being Kickstarted webcomic, The Abominable Charles Christopher. It's Karl Kerschl. Thanks for coming on, Karl.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It has.
When was the last time I was on here? Yeah.
I think like 2018. I was very surprised by that, but you know, I just want to say also, it's been a while since I've done a podcast. This is like the first one I've done in over a month, so I'm very pleased with myself that I got that right.
Mm-hmm. I haven't spoken to anyone hardly for a year, so so this is like one of my first as well. We'll see if my voice can withstand the strain.
Well, I did want to ask, speaking about strain, you're in the, okay, what day is it? It's like day, how many days do you have left? Like 13 on the Abominable Charles Christopher?
I think 13 days left, yeah. I'm just past the halfway point of this campaign.
How's your stress level?
It's not too bad. Like, it's a weird, I was prepared by, like, I read a lot about people running Kickstarters. I listened to a lot of really great podcasts. I listened to advice from people. And so I think I was prepared for how to, what this was going to feel like mostly, but it's still just an all-consuming thing. Like, it's basically taken over my life and my job for the last half a month, and there's still 13 days to go. I mean, it's really fun. It's kind of exciting every day, but really, like, every day is, I just wake up thinking, I go to bed thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? And I wake up thinking, okay, I gotta talk about this some more. I don't know who I just feel like I'm annoying people, but I think that's also a very common reaction from people who are running these things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, I think it's anybody that does anything for crowdfunding. It's just like, you can't crowdfund anything, whether it's a Kickstarter or like if you do a Patreon, or like for me, I've sketched as a subscription site. You kind of have to tell people about this stuff if you want to have any success with it. But at the same time, you feel like you're just constantly talking about it. And I think it might be one of those things that's just kind of in everyone's head who's doing that, and everyone else is just like, whatever, this is just part of the routine. But at the same time, it's hard not to feel like that. Yeah.
Well, what is it they say? Like I think people have to see something 7 times before they'll actually take action on it. I think that's kind of an average. And like combine that with the fact that, the social media algorithms kind of, favor certain tweets or bury other things. Like, inevitably, I hear from people who have run Kickstarters that they've been talking about this thing for 30 days, and then someone shows up after it's finished and says that they never heard about it. So I just kind of keep that in the back of my mind with every post. I'm sorry if you've seen this 100 times, but there's someone out there who hasn't, or is going to be upset that they missed it.
Yeah. I sort of feel like maybe the stress of the Kickstarter was somewhat mitigated by, I mean, what did you get funded in, like 45 minutes, 50 minutes or something?
Yeah, I think it was 49. I think it was we had the fund, like, that funding goal is basically, I was asking for 15,000 Canadian, which is like basically enough to just print the thing. Mm-hmm. and hopefully ship it. I kept a very modest goal. So like, anything above that is really like helping out a lot to make this thing happen. But yeah, it was a really quick. I mean, I was not expecting that. I didn't know what to expect, but it was a real. Like, I mean, I clicked launch on that thing, and after that, I was just in a flurry of like answering emails and sending messages to people and updating things on social media. And then before I knew it, it was funded, and I was just scrambling to keep up with things. But yeah, I was amazed and humbled. I still am. I don't I'm always with the Abominable Charles Christopher. There's been such a loyal fandom over the years that I don't know how to explain it, because it hasn't been. I think I updated it every week for 7 years. Like, I didn't miss a Wednesday for 7 years, or if I was going to miss one, I had a guest strip, and then I had kids and I had to do other stuff, and so it was very sporadic updates after that. And it's been a bunch of years since it's updated regularly, and a bunch of years since there was a book, and I just assumed that I didn't want to assume anything. I just figured, like, I don't know if there's a readership for this anymore, and I don't know if people are going to come out for this book, but I was astounded to see the support for it.
It is really amazing. I mean, I think that's one of the weird things about webcomics is sometimes I think that there's like this feeling that, it's like if you kind of disappear, it's like your readership is going to disappear or something like that. Or even, it's like if you do a Kickstarter type thing like this, it's just like, why would they pay for a print version when they can just read it for free? And I've talked to some webcomics creators that I'm friendly with, and I've suggested to them that they should do a Kickstarter, and they've kind of hemmed and hawed because they're just like, I don't know if anyone's going to show up for it. But I don't know, for something like yours, where it's been around for a bit, I think that's one of the underrated things about Kickstarter is that there's kind of like a cascading effect to it if it's done right, where let's say crazy nuts like Abominable Charles Christopher fans like myself get on there, and then I start tweeting about it, and then the other ones start tweeting about it, and then next thing you know, somebody that just happens to see it, those tweets is like, what is this comic? And then all of a sudden it becomes this thing that starts as something for fans, and then it becomes like a discoverability tool for somebody who wouldn't normally read a webcomic, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the difference between Kickstarter and self-publishing it the way I did before, because that was, I was marketing it just to people who were reading the comic, who came to my site. I'd tweet about it or whatever, but it was still, a pre-order. Like I put the book up and I said, pre-order this if you want it, and then I'll print it and I'll send it to you. But Kickstarter seems to have really nailed down like a shareability algorithm or something. I mean, like they're really, it's a really good place for discoverability, which is not something you can say about a lot of other platforms. So my hope for this was like, yes, I want to be able to give existing readers a book they've been waiting for a long time, but also like I want to see if Kickstarter can actually expand the readership of this comic, because I feel like I've always felt like there's a bigger audience for this comic, and I don't know how to reach them. Because most of my reach is within mainstream comics. Like those are the people generally who are following me on social media. But maybe Kickstarter will actually expand the readership of this thing, which would be amazing. So, and I think that's happening. I mean, I can't see it for certain yet, but like once I look at all the data afterwards, I think hopefully it'll have picked up a few new people.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's get into what the Abominable Charles Christopher is all about. I'm going to do your explanation of it, and then I'm going to do my explanation of it. My explanation, I have to warn you, is maybe very stupid. But okay,
yours is probably better.
No, it isn't. I came up with a really outlandish, perhaps, connection for what it's about. Okay, so it's your long-running webcomic that you started in 2007. You won the Eisner for Best Webcomic for that, right?
Yeah.
2010,
I think.
Yeah, so which you recently described in an interview as being about a dim-witted Sasquatch navigating a world full of chatty animals. And that is 100% accurate, don't get me wrong. But I also sort of feel like in some ways, this is where it gets really stupid. I thought about this last night. Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I think it's in some ways like the comic equivalent of Seinfeld, where it's a comic about nothing, but also everything. And I find that to be really interesting because it's like there's so much about it that's just like people meandering instead of New York City, and like monks, they're like, rolling around this, the cedar forest, and they're like hanging out with each other and getting sold stuff by skunks and doing all this other stuff. But at the same time, one of the things I really love about it is there are so many elements about it that I look at this gaggle of geese flying through the air and they're saying something that is like in my brain, or, they're connecting with something that's like a deep life thought. And I find that to be really like a fascinating balance. And obviously it's not done in a comedic way, or purely comedic way like Seinfeld. But okay, I have to ask, terrible suggestion or amazing suggestion? Do you see it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can. I mean, the way you describe it, I certainly can. Like, I think it's for sure like it was about nothing. Like, I mean, I didn't really have a plan going into it. It was just about like what happens if this dopey character runs into other characters. I mean, like, it's really like the crux of it. And so it ends up just being like an examination of just different parts of life. So like all of these characters are just going through different things, whether it's marital issues or rooting for sports teams or whatever, politics. I mean, like, I don't get into anything really heavy, but like I have found that well, I'll take it one step further from the Seinfeld thing, which is that I think it's kind of like that, but also like it's like it sort of falls into the realm of therapy, because for me, because I found that when I do go back to it, it's always like recently, it's always because I'm trying to work something out, or I'm terrified of, like I've had an anxiety attack, or like I'm worried about something, and then the only way I can think of to express that, other than like to my wife, who's probably sick of hearing it, is just to put it in a comic and put it out there for people. And I think it's I put it out there and I feel like, okay, I've said it. It's made me feel a bit better, and hopefully other people can kind of like relate, like people who are going through similar things. So that's where the strip has gone for me. Like I'm still wrapping up character arcs and whatnot, but it's really become like a place where I can just, like get stuff off of my chest.
Yeah.
It's almost like I described one. I did one like that was like really heavily about anxiety, and it was done in a comedic way also. But I almost didn't post it because I thought, like, I don't know if this is even a comic. This is like a cry for help. It's not even a comic anymore.
Right.
Like, I don't know who this is for, but I felt better when I did it, and I'm glad I put it up.
I recently went to this art exhibit that was it was in San Antonio. It was an art installation, and they had this one part of the installation that was a room of secrets, and they had like these two phones, or these two like phone booths you could go in and you could share a secret. Around the room were other phones where you could go in and you could listen to people's secrets from the previous month, and it was interesting because like the idea behind it was you go in there and you share this thing with no one but also everyone at the same time. And the idea is that there's a catharsis there. There's like a release. And it is interesting because, I mean, that's, I think, pretty much what you're saying, where it's just like, if you put your anxiety into these comics, it's like, even if no one reads them, even if everyone reads them, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, it's kind of, I mean, the funny thing is like, as much as it is often a very silly comic about like woodland creatures trying to get with barmaids and games of Dungeons and Dragons with their friends, it's like, I don't know, Charles Christopher is an extremely personal project, or it's become one at least, right?
Yeah, I guess it probably always was one. I just didn't realize it. It's only in retrospect, like when I go back and start looking through comics, especially if I'm putting a book together, like I start to realize what it's about. Like I don't know, I can't speak to other writers, but I find that like when I'm working on anything, I don't really know what it's about until it's done and I can go and look at it again. And I think, oh, this is. Well, it was like that with Isola also. When Brendan and I were putting together the second volume, we made some changes to it before it went to print. Like I drew a bunch of extra pages and we changed some stuff because we reread the whole thing. Like it came out in issues, 5 issues, and then so when we reread it all for the trade, we were like, oh, this is about mothers.
Mm-hmm.
This is about people's relationship to their mothers, and we should probably. Like we should probably address that or end it in a way that to put a point on that. And so we edited and I redrew a bunch of stuff. And so the same thing with Abominable. Like I don't, only when I look back on it, do I realize what I was really getting at. Like there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of personal feelings in it.
Yeah. I read in an interview that you realized it was often about parenting before you were ever a parent, which I thought was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird. Like there was so much stuff about parenting in that comic before I knew anything about parenting. And I don't know, maybe that was just to kind of like, it could be just partly because I knew my parents were reading it. And I just wanted to like throw some stuff back there to kind of let them know that I'd been listening
Mm-hmm.
over the years, So there's stuff in there I'm really proud of. Like I sometimes I don't know, and I think I've said this before, maybe even publicly, but like I don't understand what people get out of this comic because it's such a weird mix of disparate elements. Like it's as a story, it doesn't make any real sense, but it makes a lot of emotional sense. You know what I mean? Like it feels like it makes sense, even though it's kind of it might contradict itself here and there, and it doesn't really follow a really solid linear thread or anything like that. And it always amazes me that people enjoy it because I find it to be maybe too personal, like maybe it's too all over the place. But yeah, like I'm always surprised by it, and I'm really glad that it connects with people.
I think the interesting thing is flashing back to your original days of me reading this. I think originally I was into seeing where Charles was going to go. And then, oh my God, this is terrible. I need to reread it clearly because I don't remember the name of the fox who wrecked my heart.
Mhm.
What is his
It was
name?
Townsend.
Townsend. Oh my god, I can't believe I didn't remember Townsend. Anyways, so Townsend and like him and Charles going up the mountain, and then everything that happened from there, and then the brothers and everything like that. Like that story, I was like so hooked on. I mean, both of the prints that I own. One is Charles and Townsend like basically like snuggling for warmth on the mountain as they're going up the mountain, and then the other one is Charles with Townsend's brothers on a log going down the river. And the interesting thing is initially I was all about that. And I remember every once in a while there'd be the interludes. There'd be like Moon Bear, and then there would be just like random things where like all of a sudden a skunk comes out and tries to sell somebody something in the woods. And I was just like, what the hell? I want more Townsend. I want more Charles. What's going on? And then it kind of flipped, and it was just like I got so used to that, and I'm just like, can't I get another singles profile for a woodland creature? And it's interesting because I think that as the story quote unquote story, as the comic evolved, I think almost like the readers might have evolved along with it. Either that, or I'm just like putting my own feelings upon everyone else.
Well, it does feel more Seinfeld-ish when you talk about it that way. Like, I mean, those, like a sitcom like that will throw in these sort of like, like secondary, tertiary characters, and like the more you see them, the more you kind of get to know them, the more their characters get and their personalities get fleshed out, and then you're just in there with it, like you want more Newman or more whomever, and I think that's kind of what happens. Like now, it may not be part of the like the A story, but like I want to know what's going on with this bird's in-laws. Like I'm as interested in that as anything else.
I really like the terrible husband bird who has a very, very like understanding, but also his wife is very understanding, but also definitely thinks he's at least 20% of an idiot, which is pretty great. But
yeah.
I do.
He's definitely 20% an idiot. I don't think he's a terrible husband.
I like it kind of felt like you were setting me up today because your comic, I think it went up this morning, the Stanley Cup one, the sports one, because I have a tendency of talking about sports on here, and the fact that you had a sports comic go up today, I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe Carl's doing this to me. This is just. Are you a hockey fan?
I'm not really. Like, it's a little bit of a troll. Like I'll follow playoffs hockey sometimes when it's that time. Like I grew up in Toronto, or I was born in Toronto, and I grew up in Niagara Falls. But I was in Toronto a lot. So like if I had to pick a team to support, it would be the Maple Leafs.
Right.
But now I've been living in Montreal for like over 20 years, and I'm still, if I had to choose, would root for the Leafs, which is horrible for my in-laws here, who are like super diehard Habs fans. But like that comic was just about like I don't fully, like I just see them as brands, like I don't fully understand the entire the dedication to a home team if no one from the home team is actually from the home city. Like, and I get why people do it. Like I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate there. But I think it's why I kind of like the Olympics, because like everyone competing is actually from that country.
Yeah.
I understand. Like I see both sides of it. I'm just kind of throwing it out there to be kind of a
contrarian,
controversial jerk. Yeah.
I mean, there was somebody who wrote about sports. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was a comedian, and they said that sports is rooting for laundry. And I always thought that to be a really funny phrase, because somebody who you rooted for years will leave, and all of a sudden they become your like nemesis. And despite the fact that that's an actual person, as opposed to the other one, which is like a pile of laundry owned by a billionaire. And it's like, sports is a very odd thing. But I do like the fact that you kind of like touch on those things. Well, I brought up the skunk several times, but one of my favorite things in recent years that you've done is like you've evolved the idea of the skunks. To poorly explain it, basically they are operating they're like salesmen for basically a retail franchise that's owned by somebody, right?
Yeah, they're really the only representation of like a commercial or economic system in the entire comic. So like anything to do with like marketing or advertising or selling or capitalism, like that's all just in there. It's just if I have something funny to say about any of those things, it goes through this sort of skunk filter.
Well, I just love the fact that you went from just kind of a straight sales aspect early on into bringing in like modern stuff like pop-ups and things like that. I just like, I don't know, when you were bringing in that wrinkle, but that does bring me to, when you're building the comic, especially when you're kind of, you took some time off for a bit. There was some like fits and starts, but when you're getting back into like this volume 3, how do you decide what to do strip to strip? Like, do you have a larger plan for where you want to go, or is it kind of improvisational?
It's sort of both. Like I have a bunch of these established characters and certain plot threads, and I don't want to introduce a lot of new characters. So I just kind of have like a running list of like where these character threads are going. Like I know how each of them sort of end up, and and the goal is just to wrap all of that stuff up by the end. And so like I'll just jump from from one kind of situation to the next, and like just basically pick a character I haven't looked at in a long time and see where they're at in their story thread, and then I'll jump back to the main thread, which is like the Charles Christopher thing. But it got very like, but that story got very kind of epic and cataclysmic and destructive. So it's like, so coming out of that is has been a bit of a challenge. Like it's like a lot of stuff really came to a head in the main story. So like you probably noticed that I'm focusing a lot on other stuff just to keep it kind of light, because there's like, otherwise it would just be a lot of devastation.
And now, a message from Bad Idea. Bad Idea is over, but there's still advertising, so I don't know what's going on. I guess it's another bad idea from Bad Idea. And now, back to the show. Do you have, like, is there a kind of a clock in your head that, like, I need to get back to the main plot at X point or something like that? Or, like, it needs to be Y percentage of the book? Or is it, again, is that stuff more feel-based too?
It's feel based, but like I do still think of it as like the main thrust of it. So like, and the strip is called The Abominable Charles Christopher. So like I feel if I don't get back to him, like even if he's not dealing with story stuff, even if he's just like interacting like eating sap off a tree or something like that, like he's like to me that counts as like as main story stuff. Like if he's in the comic, I feel like I've represented I've represented the main character, the titular character, effectively, but like, I don't know, it's more my feeling really. Like I think like probably if I had to ballpark it, I'd say like I tried to do like 50 to like 60%, 50 to 60% Charles Christopher based stuff, and then everything else is just kind of spin-off characters.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit, I've long wanted. Maybe I missed one. Maybe one's in there. But I'm a big Peregrine Falcon fan, and I know that like I read originally that you just kind of want. Well, actually, I think you said it in the Kickstarter video. You basically just want to draw animals, and Marvel and DC is not a great place to do that. So this kind of gave you a platform to do something you really wanted to do. This is ostensibly taking place in a cedar forest somewhere in the world, but it has a very specific type of fauna we've come to expect. But do you have any rules about the animals that can be included in this story? Like, you're not just going to all of a sudden have like a polar bear or something.
No, I could get away with a polar bear. Like my rules for myself are mostly just that like I'm dealing with like North American fauna. Like it's mostly like animals that would have been in the woods where like near where I grew up. But also, if we went a bit north or south of there, I think I could get away with that. But the crazy thing is that like also like it's ostensibly like on the border of Sumeria. So like, so this is what I mean of it. Like it doesn't actually make any sense. Like there's the king of Uruk, and like ancient Uruk. Like it doesn't actually make any logical sense that those things would be placed side by side, but they're that's just what the comic ended up being. Also, like there are guns and like animal traps being used, like nothing that would suggest like old like Sumerian tech or anything like that. Though the architecture is based on like old ziggurats and things like that.
I mean, honestly, it's like even if everything is kind of built off of ideas of like, the forests of North America and like Sumeria and things like that, I mean, it's just you're creating your own world from things that you know. And I don't know if it necessarily like really harms it or anything like that. But actually, this does tie into something that I think is kind of interesting. And I love how funny it is. But the thing I've always connected with it is how poignant and thoughtful it can be. Like the towns and stuff that aforementioned, like I'm just going to explain this strip really quick. There's like one 4-panel strip. I'm sure I brought this up to you before. I brought it up a little bit earlier, where a group of migrating or a flock of migrating geese, where one shares on the very last panel how whenever they're traveling, they want to be home. And whenever they're home, they want to be traveling. And I almost always think of that when I'm traveling, because I'm like texting my wife being like, did our cat sitter send any pictures of our cats? Like, what's going on? Like, can you give me any updates? And I find it to be deeply relatable. But do you find that, when you're talking about what Charles Christopher is about, it's kind of hard to boil it down to a simple idea, because even the simple idea isn't necessarily representative of what it really is. Like, do you feel like the vibe changes ever make it kind of tough to sum up to people?
I've always found it tough to sum up. Like I never really know what it's actually about, which is why if I'm describing it like in a quick elevator pitch, I'll just focus on like the goofy aspects of it, just to get people in the door, like so they can at least check it out and then judge for themselves. Like I don't want to, like it does tend to get melancholy, and I don't want to advertise that really, because I think it might scare people away. But I think once you're in it, that stuff all kind of makes sense. I think like some of my favorite, like the towns and stuff, I really like. Another interesting thing, like to me, is that if you go back, like I did those as weekly strips, so like they made a lot of they felt like they were paced correctly. If you go back and read it in the book form, like the Townsend stuff
short,
is like really short. Like it goes by pretty quickly, and it's sort of a testament, I think, to that character that people react as strongly as they do to it, because he's not really around for very long. And I think of that a lot. Like I think my favorite stuff in that storyline is not the stuff with him so much as is the stuff with like when like the cutting back to his mother, wondering where he is. Like that's the stuff that really resonates.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's kind of funny too, where I think that's just all comics, where it's like you look back and people who talk about the X-Men, they're always like, oh my God, the Dark Phoenix saga, that's like the best X-Men story ever. And then you're like, that was like 9 issues, like 4 decades ago. And it's like still the one that everyone points to. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at the same time, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's like, it's kind of a blip. It's like this really like quick part of a larger story. And I don't know. I mean, I do think it's interesting that when, on the Kickstarter page, you have some examples of comics from book 3. And the first one you have on there as an example is actually pretty melancholy. It's the one of the raccoon talking to the tree that was in regards to like overforesting in British Columbia, was it?
It was not originally. Like I reposted it in support of that.
Oh,
afterwards.
okay.
But like, no, it was just like a I don't know. I just had something to say about trees, I guess, that day. It was a few years ago. I know. I just really like that strip, and I guess I don't know why I led with it, but it always just meant a lot to me.
I do think it's interesting. Do you feel like your relationship, like the pacing of everything, it's interesting because like, okay, originally you did it as webcomic, right? And then you did your hardcovers and your soft covers that you sold, pre-ordered online. And the pacing on that is way different, as you just said. But then on top of that, you've started doing them on Instagram. And I have to admit, reading them on Instagram is like a way different pacing also. And that one where you reposted it in regards to the overforesting, like the way that you did it, because you could use them as individual screens and then you build up to that last panel being him next to the tree, like it hits like so hard, that last bit. And it's interesting how much the format changes the pacing with this book. I mean, probably all books, but this one in particular.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started posting them on Instagram fairly recently. Like I wasn't a big Instagram user, but I do like that swipe through, and the fact that you can just do like a lot of images as opposed to Twitter's 4.
Right.
It just makes it a really nice reading experience. Like it's like the images are bigger. It it's more like a page turn, like it feels like as opposed to just taking in the whole strip at once. It's kind of nice to give the reader that like a little bit of control over the pace. It's fun. Like I was toying with the idea of just like reposting like the entire series from the beginning on Instagram, just like one day or at a time or something like that, because I like the way that they read. Some of them, some of the panel layouts are a little funky, so it might be difficult to do. But if you're a webcomic creator and you've got a pretty standard sort of format, like square panels or rectangular panels or like a lot of same size panels, like I think like I don't even know if you need a website anymore. Like I think Instagram is like a pretty good publishing platform for your webcomic.
I mean, I think the question with that, a lot of times, I mean, I think this is the question with basically doing anything online. It's like, how do you monetize it? But if you don't really care about that and you're just looking for discoverability, I mean, that's the thing too, is I mean, just think about when you started in 2007 and how much the online space has changed for what you can do with comics. It's actually like kind of insane. Like you could, back then it was just like put it on a website and hope somebody discovers it basically. But now it's like you can put it on like a million different platforms. I mean, I'm sure there's people on TikTok who are making comics and I don't know what that would look like, but there probably is.
I'm sure there probably are. I mean, I think one big difference is that like people were very protective of their content and their branded website for their comic back in like the early 2000s and mid 2000s, because they were ad supporting it. Like they were monetizing it by like doing ad clicks. So like you'd read the comic or click through the comic, and that's how people made money. But now it's ad sales have or ad support for that sort of thing have basically like fallen down to nothing. So having that website is less important, and really just being able to get it in front of as many people as possible is to your advantage. So like that has changed a lot. Like I never, I was doing it as a hobby, so I never got into the ad thing, but I've seen people scramble to kind of shift gears and change the way they monetize their comic over the last 10, 15 years, because things change so much. And then Patreon and Kickstarter have changed the game a lot too. Like that seems to be the default format for actually making a living at this now.
I think a really interesting combination is those two with like Webtoon, because Webtoon has like partnerships with Patreon, and then like you own the rights if you're an original, and it's just like it really in a lot of ways makes a ton of sense, especially for younger creators. Of course, getting into the originals part for Webtoon is a harder sell than I'm making it seem, for sure. But I do think it's, just to shift gears really quick, I do think it's really interesting looking at what you've done kind of in like the last year-ish. Maybe it was a little longer. I don't remember when Death Transit Tanager started, but you've been like, so you have this comic that you put up on there that I don't even know how to describe it. Miyazaki's Metroid. Let's say that, which is probably a too broad of a generalization, but I'm going to go with it anyways. And you put it up on your website, and initially it was like a subscription-based one, and then you put it up for free, but you could also like pay for it, I believe, if you wanted. And I don't know, I read in an interview that you're using your website as a way to like unify all of your projects, which is, it's like basically a hub for everything you do. I'm just interested, given this, especially given what you said, where you're like, I don't even know if you really need a website anymore. Why did you decide to go that route?
I did it because I just am working on so many different things. Like between like the mainstream stuff and Abominable Charles Christopher and Death Transit Tanager and other things I've got going on, I just thought like, rather than have them all be kind of like separate and out in the, kind of like holding their own out in the wilds, I would put them all in one place just so people could find them more easily. Like I think part of my personal problem professionally, like with my career, has been that like I've never, like I just kind of float in and out of the industry as I, it's like as I become interested in things. Like I'll do like a mini series here, or like a couple issues of this here, some covers of that there, and then I'll do a web comic, and no one really knows what to make of that. Like it's not a marketable brand, so to speak. So I just thought, well, maybe it'll make more sense to people, or even to myself, to put all the things I'm working on in one place, and just under my name, so people can see what I'm doing. Because otherwise you're just, if you want to read my work, you're just kind of all over the place trying to find it. It just seemed complicated. And I looked into Patreon um, as a means of maybe using that to maybe monetize some of this stuff. But I don't know. Like as I looked at it, there's something I understand the value of it. I mean, I understand the kind of like brand trust value of Patreon and the fact that they can they can simplify the like payments and whatnot. But it seemed to me that like as a guy who likes tech anyway and likes building websites, it seemed to me that like they weren't really doing a whole lot that I couldn't just build myself. Like they're basically offering a blog and a payment gateway.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I could just do that. Like I could just build that without any real hassle using like WordPress and a couple of plugins. And so I did that as an experiment, and I invited some people into to, like see if they'd be interested. And it's turned into something really cool. Like I'm really happy with this subscription model on my website because it's like a pay what you want. Like you can pay whatever. Like it's like the minimum is $2, so like it's a monthly payment of whatever you want, and then you just get access to like lots of locked posts, like process videos and like a lot of behind the scenes stuff, a lot of like pitches for things. Like when I did that Batman Black and White story, like there's a blog post with the entire like my whole script for it, like the process of like revisions it went through, all the roughs, all the inks, like basically like from start to finish. Like I'll do stuff like that and put it on there. And when I did Death Transit Tanager, that was a sci-fi comic I started just for fun in the pandemic, and I thought, well, I'll put this up as just more content for subscribers. So when I finished a page or two, I'd put them up and I'd send people an email and they'd read it as it was being updated. And then when it was finished, it was always my intent to like basically make it another free webcomic, which was like I got a lot of like I talked to a bunch of friends about that who all said it was kind of a stupid move, but like I'm a real big believer in the like the free online model. Like I just think and I think it's proven out by like the way the Abominable Charles Christopher has worked out. Like I like to put stuff up for free for people. If you want to see the process stuff or be there like on the cutting edge of it, then you can become a subscriber. But otherwise, like it's there for you to read, and if you like it, you can support it. And like eventually there'll be you can buy a PDF of it for a couple bucks. Eventually there'll be a physical book, and you can support it that way if you want. But if not, that's also cool. I think it was like I was talking to someone about this the other day. I was talking to someone in a online the other day and remembered. I'm paraphrasing, but I think Neil Gaiman basically said like no one's favorite book is one that they bought. Like it was always something that was given to you. Like and your favorite book in the world is probably one that you may have never purchased for yourself, but you've probably purchased like 10 times for
Someone
friends and
else.
family. And yeah, and I'm a big believer in that. And I think I would do everything that way if I could. Like all of my projects, just post them all online for everybody first, and then publish books later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it is interesting because this Kickstarter alone kind of proves that that is a model that can work because I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because it seems like, again, I don't know the composition of who has backed the Abominable Charles Christopher Kickstarter, but it seems like there's different audiences for print and for the webcomic. Maybe.
Yeah, I think for sure. And I've even talked to a couple publishers recently just about this sort of like about Tanager and about Charles Christopher, just kind of picking their brains. And it seems that there's been a shift in thinking. Like I think 5 years ago, or maybe even more recently, like pitching a project, so like pitching a book to a publisher that has already been free online and already been kickstarted would be, a deal breaker. Like no one would want to touch it. But now I think people get it. Like everyone I've talked to has been like, oh yeah, we get it. Like there's different audiences for online. There's different audiences for a Kickstarter than there are for a direct market book. Like there's almost completely different audiences, and people are more willing to, or publishers, I should say, are more willing to republish a thing that's already been kickstarted in print and it already exists for free online as a book under their own imprint, knowing that there's an audience there that hasn't been reached. And I think that's amazing. I think it's correct, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, perfect proof of that is I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Ngozi Ukazu has Check Please, which started as a webcomic and then was kickstarted and then was picked up by First Second and was successful in all three like aspects. Like there's webcomic readers, there's people who only back the Kickstarters, and then there's people who read it in like the First Second books. And it's interesting that I mean, 15 years ago that would never have happened. I mean, individually those aspects probably wouldn't have happened. I mean, obviously because Kickstarter didn't exist, but like even after Kickstarter came together, I don't think people would have believed in it, because I've had retailers tell me that they think that when a book comes out via Kickstarter, there's no point in carrying it afterwards because the audience has already been eaten up by the Kickstarter. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like it's cannibalizing the potential readership. But I think that that's one of the interesting things, and why I think that your website is smart in its approach, is that I think the idea of the one size fits all fan is dead and gone. And I think that there's different ways to approach people, and the smart way to do it is to try a number of different ways. I mean, honestly, like let's say when you finish volume 4 and you're done with Abominable Charles Christopher, there's no reason why First Second or someone couldn't publish it and you find a completely different audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, right now, I mean, my eye has not been like for that project in particular. Like I've never thought about the direct market. You know, like there are a lot of people, a lot of potential readers there, and I'd be happy to work with a publisher on that and not have to. I don't know anything about distribution and getting to bookstores, but I think there's a place for that book in those stores, and yeah, it makes sense to get it out there. Like it's just like it's just another avenue of publishing, I think. But yeah, I did follow Check Please, and like I listened to an interview with Ngozi, and it was one of the things that that really kind of sold me on the Kickstarter model. Like I just remember she was talking about her publishing deals, and I was thinking, wow, it's amazing that that's where we are now. Like that you can people are progressive enough to realize that those are different markets. And yeah, she's been killing it. I mean, like I'm really happy for her. It's proven a lot of marketing theories, I think. And so I think change is happening as a result.
It is really wild how much comics is, or actually just, I mean, the world has changed, but comics in specific have changed since 2007 when you first started, though. Because it's like, can you imagine trying to pitch a publisher? I mean, that 2007 was the year after Scholastic Graphics and First Second came out. So like the kids boom was not even, it was kind of starting. Manga was on a completely different level. Webtoon didn't exist. Patreon didn't exist. Kickstarter didn't exist. I mean, like trying to make something like Abominable Charles Christopher work would have been, I mean, in a traditional way of making comics would have been extremely difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually still amazed when publishers, try to prevent people from posting images of the work online before it's published. Like I just think, like, really, like it's like as long as you're not spoiling any major story or plot points, I mean, like it's all just advertising. Like,
oh yeah,
people get really bent out of shape about it.
Did you? I don't. Do you know Jesse Lonergan?
I know the name.
Oh, he did a comic last year. I think I actually ended up getting nominated for an Eisner. It's Hydra, and it's like this one shot that Image did that's oversized. He self-published it before, and the funny thing is like, so I think it was the day before it was released in comic shops, he posted a video on Twitter that was literally just him flipping through his own comic, like every page, which is like, I'm going to hazard a guess is traditionally a no-no in the world of comics promotion. It sold me on it. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I got to see it for myself. And I ended up buying it. And I do think it is kind of funny. It's similar in sports, to bring it back into your beloved world of sports. I mean, Major League Baseball was famous for people posting videos and like shutting them down because they're like, we own the rights to this. How dare you share something? And they're like, I'm sharing it because I'm excited about it. And I think other people should be excited about it. And it's like, frankly, it's like if baseball should be encouraging people being excited about it as much as humanly possible, because most people are not excited about baseball. And it's interesting that like the instinct is to shut things down like that, because I think almost everything that's been extremely successful is largely happens because of like a domino effect of enthusiasm and like it carrying
Yeah,
from person to person.
totally. I mean, Nintendo has this problem, like they're always, maybe they've changed now, but I recall that they were constantly shutting down YouTube streams of people playing their games and stuff out of like, I guess sort of like IP protection. But man, like that's the last thing you want to do. Like you want as many people playing your games online as you can get, I think.
Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick second to talk about Macroverse. Macroverse is a next-gen mobile comics app, with its tap story format making comics feel totally native on mobile devices, which you can experience over 45 series and 400 episodes, with more launching all the time. It's a perfect time to try it out, too. Many of the most popular titles like Hex 11, Dead Town, Glitch, and more are free for a limited time only, so download the app for iOS or Android and binge away. Oh, and keep an eye out on macroverse.com for some major updates on new creators, new series, and new features that bring real collectability to digital comics in a new way. Massive things are coming. If you love making, reading, and or collecting comics, you won't want to miss what Macroverse is launching this summer. And now, back to the show. Well, I want to get back to Kickstarter just a little bit more. So I am interested in, well, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about Kickstarter is you can listen to as many podcasts as you want. You can prep as much as you want, but it always seems like something kind of surprises you in the experience. Is there anything that surprised you about the experience of Kickstarter in this book?
I wouldn't say surprised me. Like I was prepared. Like one of the reasons that it took me so long to actually pull the trigger on this Kickstarter is because I spent literally like a year and a half waffling back and forth and weighing options about whether to do softcover or hardcover editions of this book. Because as you know, like I led, like the previous two volumes, I led with hardcover editions and I did soft covers afterwards. And the hardcovers are these like really nice kind of like fuzzy kind of fake suede bound books, and they're kind of a deluxe edition, but they're super, super expensive to make. And I thought, and I really wanted to launch it as like a Kickstarter for this hardcover, but I thought, I don't, first of all, it's really expensive. Like for my first Kickstarter, I thought like, I don't know if I can reach a funding goal, to make this hardcover, which in retrospect now, yes, I could have,
Mm-hmm.
but
I would have bought it.
the other problem, the other problem was that, I didn't have any copies. I don't have any copies of the first volume in hardcover. And I thought, I can't put this hardcover book 3 up here as a Kickstarter if people can't get the first one. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me to like it's just going to turn people off. Like, why would I buy this third book if I can't get the first one? So I thought, after a lot of deliberation and like talking to a lot of people, I finally thought, okay, I'm going to do this softcover, and we'll just see how it goes. And hopefully it'll do well enough that maybe I can do a hardcover after. And so I was not surprised by the fact that like I got like basically like the day one of that Kickstarter, I just answered like 99% of the messages and feedback I got from people were just asking for a hardcover version.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through like as well as that Kickstarter did on the first day. Like I think it was at like $50,000 on day one or something like just after beginning of day two. Like I was actually depressed for a lot of day two.
Because you felt like you left money on the table?
Yeah, like a friend of mine called and said, "How you feeling?" I was like, "Oh man, like I just feel like I screwed up. Like I feel like I just should have gone with my gut and made this hardcover. Like, and I feel like I took a lot of advice and I should have just gone with my instincts and done it." And they said, "Well, look, it's like a 30-day campaign. Maybe you can, turn this around. Maybe it'll work out." And so like I've just been on the phone and emailing with printers and stuff, trying to see how I can maybe offer this. Like I really like doing stretch goals for like, I know your audience probably knows, but like after a Kickstarter project reaches its funding goal, they typically offer stretch goals for things like above and beyond. Like if we had a goal of $20,000. If we get to $25,000, we'll add this and that to the book. And I thought, well, I mean, I can't, it's ridiculous for me to do that because it's like 400% funded. Like anything I want to do to that book, I can now do.
Mm-hmm.
So I really have only one goal and it's to be able to afford to print this hardcover. So that's been my. I know you asked about surprise. It's not a surprise so much as it is like my big takeaway from this is um, don't. I guess just don't try to get clever with your Kickstarter. Just do what you feel you really want to do, and do what you feel like do what's going to make your readers the happiest, and just go with it. And if if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least you were sincere about it. And I just that's how I felt about it. And I'm much more positive about it now. Like I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for that. Like I think it could hopefully work out. But yeah, it's been an emotional roller coaster because of it.
I have a deeply contrarian take, even to my own thoughts on this issue. So I have.
I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I have the first two hardcovers, and my instinct was I was like, I would love the third hardcover, but I'm sure you know this. Like one of the amazing things about Kickstarter is when you have a successful first one, then when you do the second one, you have this entire group of people that you can deliver that to immediately as soon as you launch the second one. It's like immediate email to all the people who backed you previously saying this new one is up. So there's a tendency, like you look at like Elsa Charretier, like she has really done amazing stuff with her Kickstarters because she's just building and building and building on her list. And like every project, like each art book she's done has been bigger than the last one for that reason. And I actually think like comics is a world of double dipping. It's like, if I love Kaiju Max, then I'll probably buy it in single issues, and then I'll probably buy it in trades, and then I'll probably buy it in hardcovers because I want ease of access and I just love it so much. Like Bone, I have like a million different versions of Bone. I have like so many single issues for Bone, and then I have some of the color single editions, and then I also have like the one volume, and now there's like the 30th anniversary that's coming out, and I'm like, I might get that too. And it's just because that's kind of how comic fans work. I actually think that doing a separate Kickstarter just for the hardcovers later on would be a really smart move because A, you'd probably get some double dipping, and B, or actually you'd get a lot of double dipping, and then B, on top of that, you would get like new people who specifically want like that incredible quality version, and maybe they were waiting on it from the first one. Like there's probably people who just passed on this one who might want to get on that. And so I see that as a potential another place where you could find other new readers who are interested in this like really high production value version, because I don't know, that's one of the trends I've been watching the last few years in comics is like people don't just want a floppy comic. People want something that they can put on a bookshelf and like be proud of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it makes total sense. Like it's just, I guess it's just a question of like, like what you're like the psychology of like marketing and how you want to release this stuff. Like I can see both sides of it. I mean, like part of me wants to just make a lot of people happy and just be able to have this hardcover available here. But maybe, like I also see the sense in doing a whole separate campaign for it. It's just like at that point, it's just the unknown. Like maybe no one would come out for it. Like especially if there's not like if there's not a volume 1 hardcover, like I'd end up having to print both, which would make it a really expensive campaign. But maybe it would work. Like I don't know. I like hearing feedback about it because it helps get me out of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. I mean, as someone who crowdfunds a lot of different things, it's like the world of a crowdfunder is a stressful one. But I don't know. It is kind of funny because I'm getting the first 2 volumes in softcover. I've already thought like, who am I going to give these to? And it's kind of like what you were saying about the your favorite comic is something that somebody gave to you and everything. I imagine there's gonna be a lot of Charles Christopher fans who are getting the 3rd volume, and then they're gonna have extra copies of the 1st and 2nd one, and next thing you know, they're gonna pass it off to a friend who's gonna be there for the 3rd volume or the 4th volume Kickstarter. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. But I read in an interview that you said somebody asked you like effectively about crowdfunding as like this major shift for the industry, and you said you described it as a major shift for you specifically in an interview. I mean, why is that? Is it just because like you've taken to this and you realize now just how kind of game changing it can be for self-published stuff?
I think I always knew that. I mean, I don't remember I don't remember that quote or what the context was, but I just when I think of it now, I think of it like I think it's going to take over a lot of like comic like creator owned publishing releases. Like I think you're just going to see a lot more of this kind of thing going on. It's but like the state of the direct market and comics distribution is has changed so much and is so up in the air all the time now, that I think I just think we're going to see like a real like a wave of creators taking to this sort of Kickstarter platform, especially if if they're charting like the success of like a lot of other recent projects. For me personally, like I don't know, I think it was always in the back of my mind, like back from like the early webcomic days, but because it was never my my source of income, I never really took it super seriously. But now I really only want to work on my own stuff whenever possible. So it just feels like it's just emboldened me to do things I want to do and know that like there's a home for it. So like I can actually make a living at it using Kickstarter or some kind of crowdfunding platform.
Yeah. Okay, just a few more questions. Last question on Charles Christopher in specific. So the fourth, I read that the fourth volume, the next one after this one, will close it out. That'll be the end of Charles Christopher. And I'm not trying to make you sound like George R.R. Martin, but there was a part of me that was always like, I don't know if this is going to finish. Like, I didn't know if like this is going to be something you ever get to because you were always doing other things. But when you were, let's say like 5 years ago, and you're like, I don't know, I don't remember what the time was specifically, but let's say coming off of Gotham Academy-ish, going towards Isola, did you always feel like you needed to finish Abominable Charles Christopher? Or I don't know. I mean, I just feel like it's an interesting book because like in some ways it's like its completion in some ways because of its kind of meditative nature at times almost feels secondary to what it's about. Like, did it feel like an essential thing the whole time that you wanted to finish this out?
It definitely feels like it could just end whenever and it wouldn't it wouldn't hurt it but I feel like this sort of responsibility partly to the characters to just see through some of these character arcs and partly to myself just to actually finish a thing. Like there's like a real this sort of profound personal growth that happens every time you finish a project. Like, and I think I mean like, I guess any project, but especially projects that you are like independent, that you started on your own. Like anytime I finish something that I started, I feel like, I just feel like I've kind of grown as a human. Like I've kind of leveled up in a way, and I feel like I owe it to myself and everyone else to kind of like wrap up some of these stories. But I mean, for what it's worth, like wrapping up the Charles Christopher's main story is like, I think it'll be like there'll be an ending, but it's also like a very cyclical kind of open-ended thing, like it's about so many things and about so many characters that I don't think any of it really has a proper ending. I just need to kind of wrap it up in a way that I sort of envisioned it when I started it. It gives some kind of closure to the characters and the readers, in order to feel like I didn't fail at it.
Yeah.
Like I do want to have some sort of ending for it, even if it's somewhat vague.
I mean, it's kind of, this, not to be cliche, but it's like the journey is what it's always been about. It's like coming across all these characters and these creatures, and Charles coming in contact with them and how they changed his life, and also just like the wacky shit they get into. I mean, it all kind of adds up. But I'm interested in some broader stuff to finish. Like I'm interested in the way, like with you have Death Transit Tanager. You mentioned you did Batman Black and White, that one. We talked before we started recording about Isola and how it's kind of been, Brennan was sick last year and everybody's got a lot of stuff going on, and so it's just been kind of on hold for a bit. But in terms of like the broader comics market, like you aren't regularly releasing comics through comic shops. And I think the weird thing is in some ways that kind of can make you seem like you're not busy, but in reality, you're like incredibly busy.
Yeah, I'm incredibly busy with like a lot of stuff. Like I keep kind of laughing uh, about this with my wife. Like I'm constantly working on things that are not making me any money. Like I'm working on a million different things, and I'm always like, she's always like, "What did you do today?" I said, "Oh, I spent all day working on this thing that's not not paying me anything." But like it's all stuff that I kind of trust will make money somewhere down the line. It's all kind of long tail. Yeah, like yeah, I'm working on a free webcomic. Like eventually I'll make a book out of that and it'll make some money. But yeah, there's an out of sight, out of mind quality to um, working in mainstream comics. But I feel like maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my perception of it, but I feel like that's changing a little bit. Like I think people follow creators and outside of the industry now in a way that maybe they didn't before. Like I'm just way more aware of people's work that I like, and I'll just get it wherever it's coming out. Like the Imminence book, like the Grass of Parnassus book that's coming out. I'm just gonna buy that wherever it is. Like I don't even know if I don't think that's coming out in comics, or maybe it is.
It is.
In the
Ad
print
House
market.
is doing a print version.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think people are all over the place. So it's like if you're following people, online, you're gonna see where the stuff is. Like none of those people feel like they've been out of the mainstream for
No.
me, even though they maybe they have been.
Well, I mean, it's. I guess that was my ultimate point, though. Is like I think that the interesting thing about comics is like 2007. There was like a very limited purview of what comics meant. There was like self-published, and then there was like the direct market, and then like the book market was kind of in its infancy, and libraries barely cared. I mean, they cared, but it was like it was still growing. And now it's like it's comics are kind of everything, and they're kind of everywhere. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because like I still think that there's to a certain degree a bit of a like a fiefdom mentality where there's like these sectioned off like these walled gardens, if you will. But it's interesting because for somebody like you and for fans of you, like comics are much bigger than many even within the medium and the industry really think. And like if you can successfully navigate all those different like platforms or all those different fiefdoms and everything like that, I don't know, that I think that's kind of the key to success today is not to look so myopic, like to expand your horizons to all the different places comics can be and all the things comics can be as well.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it just got me thinking, like, I keep using the word mainstream, but I don't know what that means anymore.
No.
Like, I'm not sure we can really call, like, like Marvel, DC superhero comics mainstream in the same way that we used to. Like, it's just, to me, like, they're just different brands or different companies who produce a certain kind of product. And they're just like a million other comics out there and a million other ways to get them that are just as mainstream, maybe more mainstream.
Oh yeah.
um, but are just not part of what we kind of culturally think of as like mainstream comic books. So
I mean,
so yeah, I go ahead.
oh, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, like Dav Pilkey does Dogman, and like I remember talking to a comic creator about that those books, and they're like, "This is trash. This looks horrible." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's trying to do something specifically for kids," and it's like just because it isn't like I don't know. Adam Hughes or like Alex Toth or something like that doesn't mean it's not accomplishing what it's trying to do. And what it's trying to do is to speak to kids. And it's doing that. I mean, that is a level of success that comics hasn't seen since at least the 90s. And it's weird how sometimes like I said, with like those different like fiefdoms, it's like sometimes it's interesting how like comics can look down upon itself in a weird way.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you something. Like my kids love those Dogman books. They have all the Dogman books, and one thing that those books do is inspire them to make comics.
Yeah.
Like my kids make their own comics now at school and at home because of those books, not because of the stuff I'm doing or because of any of the comics I read, but because it's accessible to them and they get it and they understand a sequential narrative now, like a visual sequential narrative. It's like it's simplified it and made it easy for them to get. And like I'll never, I'll never say like a bad thing about it. Like they're reading a ton of comics and they're making comics, and I think that's an amazing tribute to those books.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the last thing I want to bring up, it seems like you're really excited about all the opportunities. Like right now, I could imagine you just like sitting at home and just like kind of getting kind of lost in all of the potential things. I mean, like you were saying, like you looked at the Patreon model and you're like, why can't I just do this myself? And you just kind of seem like the type of person who, when you see a problem, you try to find a solution in a very real way that not necessarily everyone does. Is there something exciting for you about the pursuit of new and trying to find like new solutions to these old problems that comics present?
I'm interested in that stuff, but like I think a bunch of it comes from like I just question a lot of like common knowledge, like
Sure, sure.
it would have been easy for me to use Patreon, but like something like maybe it's just like an anti-authoritarian streak. I don't know what it is, but I just thought like it just seemed like an achievable thing. Like I just thought I think I could make this, and like I don't know, and then I'm not beholden to anyone or anything. I just felt like if you're going to be independent, then just be independent. Like why I just foresaw, like I thought, like the other thing about Patreon is that I thought, like, because they're not really doing anything, like they proved, don't get me wrong, they proved a model could work, and I think they're probably really good people over there, but they really proved out this sort of like model of patronage for artists, which is amazing. But they're technically, as far as I can tell, not doing anything super complicated. So to me, that means they're kind of just ripe for disruption. Like anyone could build that model. Like any other corporate entity could build that same model and compete with them. And I just thought, while I hope that doesn't happen, like I just didn't want to like build a community on Patreon and then have to move it off of there in 2 years. Like or like be beholden to anyone's sense of like political correctness, even. Not that I'm particularly controversial, but why not just avoid all of that stuff and build a thing myself? I guess I just like, even with the self-publishing, I guess I like knowing how to do stuff myself at least once or twice, like being able to do it and try it and then move on to something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's where I come from on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, I've long been a believer that comics, in the broader world of comics, one of the biggest problems with comics is it's always been a world where people believe that there is kind of one way to do things, and so you just keep doing it that way. And I always am really excited about like the random stuff that people come up with. Like I mentioned that Hedra book. It's like, it's oversized. It's like a one shot. It's all the things you're not supposed to be as a comic. But it was great.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great comic. And there's so many examples of comics that I love that at least in part stand out because they didn't try to be what other comics were. They just were what they needed to be. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone needs to wild out and do crazy things, or that great comics can't come from, the traditional single issue / trade paperback / whatever format. But I just think there's a lot of room for experimentation out there. And it's a lot cooler when, I don't know, when I like Death Transit Tanager. Like that was a very cool thing that came kind of out of nowhere for a lot of people. And it's great, and I'm glad that it exists, and I wish more things like that did exist.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the Wild West out there,
Yeah.
Like it feels like there are no rules, and there's a million ways to do anything. And I always just think, like, why do what's considered to be the correct way to do things. Like I'm sure there are other ways to do everything. I feel younger. Like since I started doing this, I've actually felt like just so energized and excited to make stuff that I've been feeling like younger than I did even a few years ago. So it's yeah, there's lots more to come from me. Like I just have a plate full of stuff I want to get out there. And it's just like a matter of scheduling it and getting it all drawn and out the door.
I love it. As a person who constantly tells my wife that I still feel super young, I am all about that youthful lifestyle, despite the fact that my age disagrees with me at that point. But anyways, Karl, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about the Abominable Charles Christopher, Kickstarter, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Karl Kerschl. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at Karl Kerschl, and in his current Kickstarter for the Abominable Charles Christopher. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content, and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Zach Thompson, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Megan Marsden, Brandon DePills, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Antonio Offen, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Scotty Young, Susanna Polo, Jeff Weira, Reed Hinckley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Felt Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Liana Kingus, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwand, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Mian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfill, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.